With a scan in her hand, the nurse turned to face the doctor. Everyone in the room was waiting with bated breath for the results of the scan to be announced. But the nurse was clearly shocked and didn't want to give it to them right away. The doctor and other people in the room were worried about her behavior and watched as she stood there still. Someone called her name, which woke her up and made her give the scan to the doctor. He knew how shocked she was when he saw it. Shelley and Rob Wall were happy living in Cumbria, northwest England, with their 2 girls. They thought they were great parents who loved their kids a lot. Shelley was able to get pregnant, which made the couple very happy as they decided to have a child. Even though Shelley and Rob already had 2 girls, they both wanted a son because they thought the 2 of them would enjoy sports together. Especially football. Their plans changed when they went to the doctor for a routine checkup, which is usual during pregnancy to make sure everything is okay. The process was familiar to Shelley and Rob from earlier pregnancies, but they had always had good results. There was bad news during this visit, though. Their baby boy had a serious problem with his skull, and only 2% of his brain was present. The doctor also told them that Noah, as they called him, had spina bifida, a birth defect that makes it hard for the spine and spinal cord to get formed properly. Shelley and Rob's hopes and plans for their child were dashed by this bad news. The doctor told Noah's parents that he would have a very bad future because he would have almost no brain matter and also have spina bifida, which would make his life much worse, seeing how badly Shelley and Rob were hurt. The doctor came up with a bold idea. Most people think of abortion as a very bad option for any mother, but the doctor thought it was the best thing to do in this case. He told them that their baby boy probably wouldn't live long and that he would need constant care even if he did. The doctor asked Shelley and Rob if this was the kind of life they wanted for their son or their other girls. Shelley and Rob thought about what to do because they had to make a tough choice. When they got home, they couldn't bring themselves to tell their beloved girls the sad news. They were determined to have a baby. And even though they knew that if they were younger, they might have thought about having an abortion, they chose to love and keep the child anyway. Shelley and Rob held on to hope, even though the odds were against the baby from the start. And their choice was very important. At birth, Noah let everyone know he was there with a loud cry. To help Noah's chances, a doctor put a shunt in his head to drain extra fluid and take pressure off of his brain cells. The parents could only wait with bated breath to see how Noah would grow. It wasn't clear to Shelley and Rob why Noah seemed healthy and happy in the early days of his life. Noah was disabled from the waist down, but he always had a good attitude, which surprised his parents. Unexpectedly, Noah did very well in his growth, which added to the mystery. Doctors had warned that he had serious special needs. But as he got closer to 3 years old, he seemed like most kids his age, aware, emotionally intelligent, and even starting to talk. As Noah reached growth milestones like collecting tree leaves, his parents wanted to see how he was doing by doing a second brain scan. The nurse came back with the scans and looked shocked as she told the doctor the shocking news. The doctor adjusted his glasses and got ready to look at the scans on top of his nose. The doctor looked at the scans and said, "She's right. I can hardly believe this." Shelley and Rob were shocked by the doctor's news because no one had told them what the scans showed. Noah, the boy who was born with only 2% of his brain working, now had an amazing 88% of it working. Without a doubt, it was a medical miracle. Dr. Gregory Scott, a neuroscience expert at Imperial College London, was interested in how Noah's brain had grown back. He thought that the shunt had made room for the brain to grow. But this was still just a guess that showed how little we know about our body's most important parts. And no matter how complicated the science was, Shelley and Rob were thrilled by the amazing result and ready for what came next. A lot of people were moved and inspired by Noah's story. which was told in the news. During a press conference, Shelley and Rob told the audience that they were going to Australia to get Noah neurophysics treatment to help him grow. The treatment included both physical rehab and mental exercises, with the hopeful hope that Noah would be able to walk again in the future. Noah's future looked good, and his story taught us a very important lesson. Without getting into the moral arguments about abortion, Noah's story was a source of hope and happiness for all people. Even though Shelley and Rob were told that taking care of Noah would be hard, they were thankful every day for their choice. They saw their faith in their son pay off with a fulfilling and amazing journey. That's all about the first story, and now let's watch another similar story. This a story about how Arthur met a girl and a boy named Harry by the side of the road. When they got dressed, their jackets and shoes were worn out. The child's face was smudged, and he held the tired woman's hand closely. The stranger told Arthur to stop, and she greeted him and asked for help in any way she could while she looked at what was going on. Arthur replied with a nod and asked them to stay with him if they had nowhere else to go. The three quickly and quietly made their way to an old cottage village where Arthur had a small, cozy home. The house was built for his wife and children, but after a painful split, he moved in by himself. Even though he was by himself, Arthur kept the house warm and cozy by cleaning it up, putting in water and gas, and building a porch. Even though he was in a few short-lived relationships, Arthur never got married again after his divorce because he was afraid of meeting someone by chance. When Arthur saw that Albina and Harry were clearly in trouble, he offered to take them in. Albina introduced herself, and the boy, who was shaking at first because it was cold, fell asleep after getting warmer. When they got to the settlement, Arthur slowed down near the house with the wrought iron fence to let them know that it was where they were going. Albina and Harry got out, and Arthur suggested they go inside because the woman's skin was blue from being outside in the cold. As Albina opened the door, Arthur gave her the key. The boy was excited to sleep in a bed that night when Arthur saw how happy the child was about something so simple. It made his heart ache. We are left wondering where they usually stayed the night. After reading this, Albina stepped in and quickly told Harry to wash his face and hands because they were dirty from the trip. Arthur stood still in the doorway and gave her a questioning look. The man understood her silent question and pointed to the bathroom, saying that towels were there, and suggested that she take a bath if she wanted to. Albina thanked him and went to the bathroom with the boy. She was both embarrassed and happy. After 15 minutes, Harry came back with strawberry soap-scented hair that was wet. Even though his old clothes smelled bad, Arthur just smiled and didn't say anything. His ex-wife's and his son's daycare clothes were among the things he hadn't had the guts to get rid of. Arthur went down to the basement and pulled out a big box of clothes, offering to help them find something that would fit. When Albina got out of the shower, she was shocked when Arthur gave her a bag and told her the clothes were clean. She was thankful to trade her old clothes for the new ones. Harry strutted around in his new clothes, and Arthur hung up their old, dirty clothes to dry. As a good host, Arthur took care of the food. Unexpectedly, Albina offered to help, telling him she didn't want to be a bother and suggesting she help with cooking. Together, they made a simple dinner, and Harry fell asleep soundly afterward. She put him to bed and started to clean up the table. When Arthur saw that she was drenched in sweat, he asked her nicely if she felt hot and gave her some paper towels. She comforted him that it was because she was sick, but she knew she didn't have much time left. Arthur didn't like hearing her talk about her approaching passing away in a distant way, as if she were talking about someone else. Albina acknowledged his reaction and told him that she had accepted truth and knew that everything had a price, and hers was coming soon. Arthur's kindness was clear in his eyes, and she thanked him for taking them in without asking any questions. Albina talked about her terminal illness and how she knew her days were short. She also talked about how she worried about Harry's future care. She was clear that she wasn't going to ask Arthur to adopt him. Even though she was in a tough spot, but if something were to happen to me, could you take him to the place I'll give you? Albina took out a piece of paper and wrote down a name and an address. Arthur read the writing carefully. It said that the trip would be at least 300 kilometers long. Arthur was interested and asked, "Who is he to you?" Albina quickly answered, "An award," then stood up and said she was tired from the heat. Arthur showed her to the bed across from the one where Harry was sleeping soundly when she asked where she could lie down. Albina laid down, put something over her head, and fell asleep right away, being awake all night. Arthur thought about the person he had met on the road. It was fall, and they were both wearing very little. Their shoes were loose, and the boy's feet were wet. After giving it a lot of thought, Arthur went back to the basement to look for Harry a good pair. He might find a nice pair of shoes in his ex-wife's collection if he was lucky. She always had good taste and took good care of her things. Albina couldn't get up when she woke up in the morning. Her legs wouldn't move. She got paler and started to have a fever. Arthur really got scared. So he called a doctor he knew. The doctor told Arthur not to self-medicate and suggested that he take the woman to the hospital. Albina's health got a little better in the hospital room, but her fever and body pains came back quickly. The doctors took Arthur aside and told him, "We're afraid we have some bad news for you. The patient is in critical condition, and it's possible she won't make it." Arthur sat down in a chair and looked at Harry, who was sitting in front of the hospital room door and being very serious as he watched people go by. Arthur asked, "That bad?" while keeping an eye on Harry. The doctor agreed, wanting to get Arthur ready for the worst. Arthur kept looking at everyone who walked by. He didn't let any workers, visitors, or patients get away from him. Harry jumped up and ran over to Arthur. All of a sudden, Harry asked, "Uncle, when can we pick up my nanny? We'll leave with her." "Right." Arthur couldn't bring himself to say the truth, so he said, "Yes. Probably." Harry went back to his chair, but he quickly got bored sitting there. He complained, "Why are we here? Let's go home." "Okay." Arthur felt the need to speak up, so he took the child's hand and led him away, saying, "Did you see that? The nanny, Albina, is getting an injection right now. She needs to have many injections and then take a bunch of big pills. She told us to go home. She'll stay in the hospital a little longer." Harry didn't argue, so he followed Arthur, telling him along the way that he and his nanny had to go somewhere. He said he had a grandfather, but he forgot who it was. The following day, Albina's situation got worse, and Arthur knew what was going to happen. In line with what he thought, Albina wasn't there the next night. Arthur found a locket on a thin leather strap among the things that were found with her. "Nanny told me to always carry this with me," Harry said as he put it around his neck. After Albina was buried, Arthur was left with Harry, who shut down and didn't want to talk to anyone. At some point, Arthur realized he had to do something to keep Harry from losing touch with the outside world. He asked Harry, "The nanny said we should go on a trip together. She even left us a map. Shall we go?" Harry looked at him doubtfully, wondering how far away it was and if they were going to somewhere specific or just any place. Arthur said he didn't know what would happen on the trip, but he still chose to drive his car. Arthur was overcome by all the questions he had because he didn't know anything about Harry's parents or other family members. They stopped several times along the way so Harry could compare the plan to their route. The trip took several hours. The boy was happy to see that the planned route matched the map. As they drove by cottages, high-rise buildings, and small shops with basic goods, Harry talked and asked Uncle Arthur if he could read and read maps. As soon as Arthur realized they were in a town, he made the decision to find the house Albina had written about. He parked his car next to a small shop and went inside. Harry asked him to buy a chocolate bar, and Arthur smiled and asked for a pack of smokes for himself, throwing a big bill to Harry as he did so. When Arthur showed her the address that Albina had written, the middle-aged woman behind the counter got very angry. "Can you tell me where this is? Why do you need to go there?" she asked Arthur. "What's wrong?" The man looked shocked. "Oh, many things," the saleswoman enthusiastically replied. "There's a resident there, someone you should avoid talking to, a well-known person around here. It is not okay to say bad things about him after saying thank you and listening." Arthur got in his car and drove along the path the woman had pointed out. After some time navigating through the city, he finally arrived at the location she had told him to go to. The car stopped next to a large 3-story mansion surrounded by a strong metal fence. Arthur found this strange. He rang the gate bell, and it quickly opened. As he pulled into a large flagstone courtyard, a strong man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit approached him. The man, who had a slight limp, asked Arthur, somewhat irritably, who he was and what he was there for. "There's a boy named Harry in there who is about 5 years old," Arthur said, pointing to his car. "His nanny asked me to bring him here in case anything happened to her." As Arthur spoke, the man's skin turned red, making Arthur worry that he might be having a stroke. "A boy. A nanny. Look at the car too," the man croaked, telling others. "Something doesn't seem right," Arthur said. 2 security guards in typical private security outfits came up to him and told them to check both the car and Harry. Harry ran up to Arthur and grabbed his leg with scared eyes as the guards grabbed his hand. "Uncle Arthur, what are we doing here?" the child begged. "Let's go back and look for the treasure somewhere else." The stranger ignored the plea and told them to come inside. Harry's face showed that he wasn't sure what was going on. The owner told security to take the child somewhere else and then turned to Arthur and said, "From the look on your face, you really don't understand what's going on." "The witch," Arthur hissed. "I found them about a week ago on the highway." He then gave the stranger a note written by Albina. "It looks like you have, in fact, met that thing. Where is she at the moment? Why did you bring the kid by himself?" insidiously asked the stranger. Instead of answering directly, Arthur told the stranger how he and Albina passed away and how they were found on the highway about a week ago. It started to rain and then snow, and they weren't dressed properly. "I took them to my house, and by the next morning, she started to feel sick. She passed away in the hospital after being diagnosed with a serious illness. Albina had written down the address and told me to take Harry there if something happened to her. I buried her in our cemetery. And now Harry and I are here." "Quite an interesting story," the man said, scratching his chin. As Harry got closer, the man motioned for him to do so and asked, "Boy, let's talk. Who are you? Who is this man?" The owner made sure that his guest was telling the truth after hearing Harry's answers. The boy suddenly took off a locket around his neck and gave it to the man. "The nanny gave me this. She told me to give it to the mustache uncle in the big house," Harry said. The owner, who had a well-kept beard, looked at the locket and changed in a way that could be seen. "The flash drive. That's where it went. I've been looking for it for so long," said the man. Arthur was still trying to figure out what was going on when he realized he had been a witness to something strange. The owner said in a calm voice, "Get my tablet. It's on my desk in the study." After a minute, the flash drive was inserted, and the screen showed a huge number of files. The owner moved with confidence to find the files he needed, and his face lit up. He said in a low voice, "Thank God. Everything was okay." He left without saying a word. Telling the security to keep a close eye on the guests who showed up out of the blue, Harry sat next to Arthur and asked in a low voice, "Who is that? When are we going home?" Arthur answered, "I don't know," and held the boy close. They had to wait at least 30 minutes before the mustachioed man came back through the front door of the living room. He smiled bewilderedly and asked the boy, "Harry, do you remember me? Can you recognize me? It's your silly Grandpa Victor. You used to call me Virus when you were little. Don't you remember?" The man suddenly wiped tears from his eyes while still looking at the confused Harry. He sang in a rough voice, "Your little birdie has come to peck at a worm that's keeping you from sleeping." Harry couldn't take his eyes off the man's face, which turned pale as he jumped up and asked, "Grandpa, is this your grandson?" Arthur broke down in tears as he saw the man hug the child. "Grandson. A grandson. I had given up hope of seeing him again," the guy said to Arthur after his feelings calmed down. "I apologize for making you wait so long. But I never thought I would see my grandson again. It's been 3 years. And we lost all trace of the boy." As Arthur sat down across from him, the man started to tell his story. "I started a business right after the crisis. You can imagine what a time it was. My wife got involved too. And by that time, our son, our only heir, was growing up. While my wife and I worked hard, he indulged himself in everything. Living a lavish lifestyle. Yes. And we weren't any better. We wanted to show off how cool we were. We overdid it. And competitors caused an accident for my wife. And she became bedridden. She passed away 7 years ago. My son decided to spiral down after her passing and brought home some dubious girl. I had nothing against it. But she was just too vulgar. You know. Instead of taking over his father's business, the heir got involved with medicine. His wife left him, leaving him with a young son to take care of Harry. He hired a girl named Albina. She cared for the child tenderly, as if he were her own. Albina had a poor mother and brother whom she supported with her nanny salary. But she couldn't afford much more than that. Apparently, word got out, and they began promising Albina the world. The man let out a heavy sigh. My competitors knew before I did how to put me out of business. They knew Jesse wouldn't be of any use. And that's how it turned out. He's still in rehab, not wanting anything but Harry. My hope was a juicy target for them. The competitors persuaded Albina to help them kidnap little Harry. Victor had no reason not to trust the girl because she was so good from the start. She took care of the child all day. But the child didn't really get any paternal love and care. The little boy rarely got to play with Grandpa Victor. But he liked it when Grandpa sang funny songs. After that, the kid would curl up on his big, soft belly and fall asleep. Albina would only have to put him in his bed. The first time they tried to take the child was on the weekend, when she asked to go for a walk with him. Grandpa didn't know what was going on, so he let her go past the mansion's boundaries. The thieves were caught when a new private security team showed up. After a week, though, Albina got a transfer of a big amount of money and knew she had to take it. She left with the child for another walk and never came back. The people Albina called at work laughed and told her, "You're asking for too much. Kid, bring the child here, or you will regret it." Albina thought about going back. But after calling the owner the first time, She knew she was in for a rough time. What happened made Victor crazy. And he yelled at her and called her names that almost made her sick. "Let me tell you this. If you dare to set foot inside my house again, don't expect any mercy. The moment you show up, I'll order you to be torn apart. And I'll start with your family if you even dare to contact them. I have both of them under my control." Albina chose to run away because what she did and how Victor reacted scared her. She quickly took money out of her card at an ATM before throwing it away. She knew that the card would be tracked. And she didn't want to give them a reason to find it before she was ready. She started by buying clothes for herself and Harry at a cheap shop. They left the city on a train while wearing masks. It was in the news and in print that Albina was being looked for. But she was too afraid to put her mother and brother in danger. Albina herself didn't remember much about the places she had been. She often spent the night as a nomad at train stops and homeless shelters along the way. If they were open. Albina's years of living on the road were not in vain. The boy grew very quickly. And she naturally made sure he ate well. Their rent-controlled apartment was a home for a few months. But soon the money ran out. Albina knew she had to find a new way to support her growing son Harry. While they were moving across the country, Albina began to think about going back home, where she planned to leave the child at the door. But she hesitated because the atmosphere was scary. Especially since Victor didn't have a great image. Victor was known to keep his promises, even though his character was questionable. This added to Albina's stress, which led to more health problems. She didn't want to get medical help because she was afraid of running into Victor's friends. In the process, she lost valuable time that could not be recovered. Which shows how complicated Santa Barbara is. As Grandpa Harry put it, Harry thanked them for not leaving them both on the street and said he was glad he had company and wouldn't have troubled himself over not seeing his only grandson for Arthur's health. Grandpa Harry owed Arthur a lot. Victor offered to stay the night. But Arthur said no. As a thank you for saving and returning his son, Victor gave Arthur a small leather suitcase. The suitcase was only a small part of what Victor owed Arthur. When Arthur got home, he found bank papers in an envelope with his name on them. He was shocked to see that his account balance showed a large amount of money. When Arthur realized Victor had important ties, he thought about this as he picked up the phone to call his ex-wife, Ellie. During the talk, he said that he was going to make a transfer. This gave Ellie the freedom to choose how to spend the unexpected money. They talked about getting together in the future to finish up the details.